Hi, everybody. This is the Bricks and Bleachers podcast. All things Chicago Cubs in under 10 minutes. Cubs offseason has been pretty quiet until the last 24 hours or so. Cubs have swung a big trade with the Houston Astros. Reportedly, they are not done either. We'll get you caught up with the Cubs roster at this moment and share a few highlights from around Major League Baseball as well. So the Cubs have acquired Kyle Tucker. A deal with the Houston Astros announced yesterday afternoon. A nice Friday the 13th surprise. He has yet to step on the field or don a Cubs uniform, but Kyle Tucker is the best offensive player on the Cubs roster. Last season for the Astros, he hit .289, 23 home runs, 11 stolen bases, slug of .585, OPS .993. We could go on and on with the numbers, but he would have led the 2024 Cubs in several statistical categories. And what makes that even more impressive is the fact he played only 78 games for the Astros. He was injured roughly half the season. He had a foul ball go off of his shin, and he missed considerable time. But when he is on the field, he makes quite an impact. Good offensively, good defensively, too. Brings a power bat, good base runner. He may be the best player on a Cubs roster over the last several years. I don't think that's hyperbole. He is the real deal. Cubs gave up Isaac Paredes, Hayden Wesneski, and Cam Smith. Paredes acquired in July. He struggled in his short time with the Cubs. They were very high on him as he, too, was supposed to have a power bat and had a team-favorable contract, but they've decided to go in a new direction at third base. Hayden Wesneski, a young pitcher who came over from the New York Yankees in a midseason trade a couple years ago. Staying healthy has been a challenge, and it's tough to see who or what he is. Comparable to several other guys on the Cubs roster, he's kind of in between. He's a good 3 or 4 inning option, so he's a short starter or a long reliever. And then there's Cam Smith, a prospect at third base. He was the Cubs' first-round pick this summer, 14th pick overall, has just 100 minor league at-bats. Looked good in those 100 at-bats, but that is a small sample size regardless of level. Good chance Astros have solved their third base dilemma, really, with 2 options at third base via the Cubs in this trade. I think the performance of Paredes and Smith will determine who ultimately wins this trade. But no doubt, Kyle Tucker is going to rake for the Cubs in 2025. The red flag with this deal is that he is a free agent after the 25 season. That's why the Astros were willing to deal him. He wants to land a big contract next offseason, and I think his contract situation will be a big test for the Cubs front office. Assuming he plays well in the year ahead, the team's willingness to offer him a long-term deal will help shape the team's future. He could be the guy they build around all the way to and maybe even beyond the year 2030. Keep in mind, Happ and Horner's deals both expire after 2026. Cody Bellinger's deal also through 26, but he has another opt-out after 25. And that leads us to what may be the next move for the Chicago Cubs, and that involves Cody Bellinger. Cubs and Yankees have been reported to be in talks for him. Both teams were pursuing Kyle Tucker, and the Cubs landed Tucker. But the Yankees still have a need. They still have a big opening on their roster. But what are they willing to part with? What can the Cubs get from the Yankees? That remains to be seen. I have said it many times before. I'll say it again. I don't think the Cubs need to be doing deals where they land a big haul of prospects. They already have many prospects in the Cubs minor league system. Don't need to be adding more. As it stands now, Kyle Tucker takes right field for the Cubs, PCA in center, Ian Happ in left. The addition of Tucker moves Bellinger to a first base and DH role. Michael Busch presumably segues over to third. Swanson and Horner remain up the middle for the Cubs. Now, if Bellinger is moved, you'd likely still have Michael Busch at first base, and then third base is a wild card, just as it was 1 year ago for the Cubs. The difference this time is Matt Shaw has had another year to develop in the minor league system. Definitely believe there will be more moves, probably not as impactful as the addition of Kyle Tucker, but we shall see. Heading into the offseason, I thought Nico Horner was going to be critical to an offseason trade. That has not been the case and probably won't be either. Nico had tendon surgery in mid-October. His status for opening day remains unknown. Looks like it'll be a situation where he arrives at spring training. Cubs medical staff will do some evaluations and then plot a path forward from there. Fingers crossed he's okay for opening day. Baseball Reference has Kyle Tucker with a WAR, wins above replacement, of 4.7 for his 78 games in 2024. That is drastically higher than anyone on the Cubs roster last season, even higher than Cody Bellinger's 2023 season with the Cubs, which I think most of us would say was a pretty solid year. Horner and Swanson both had a WAR just above 5 in 2023. But again, those guys played pretty much every day in 23. Tucker played less than half a season in 2024. So getting a full year of Tucker plus a full year of Pete Crow Armstrong, I think those two guys will account for several more wins for the Chicago Cubs. Let's talk some other offseason moves from the Cubs. Kyle Hendricks and Jorge Lopez, couple of arms we probably will not see again in a Cubs uniform. Hendricks signed early in the offseason with the Angels, a 1 year, $2.5 million deal. Lopez, still a free agent. I thought he was a great midseason pickup last year. I'd have no issue if the Cubs extended him a deal, maybe around $3 million or so. I think he was just over $2 million last season. So give him a little bump up and bring him back. I'd have no issue with that. Cubs have parted ways with a whole bunch of other guys, including Patrick Wisdom, Mike Tauchman, Adbert Alzolay, Trey Winginter, Nick Madrigal, Brennan Davis. Tauchman not returning to the Cubs. In fact, he's already signed with the White Sox. That signing took place just a couple of days after the Cubs let him go. Cubs have added a pair of arms reliever Eli Morgan. They've also signed Matt Boyd to the starting rotation, and Carson Kelly is signed, I think, to a 2-year deal as another option behind the plate for the Cubs. Let's look quickly at a few moves elsewhere in Major League Baseball. Juan Soto, the big contract this offseason, 15 years, $765 million with the New York Mets. Interesting to note, Soto can opt out after 5 years. There's also another clause where if he stays with the Mets beyond that 5-year deal, then he will be making an additional $4 million per year for each year that he stays with the Mets after year 5. So the deal could balloon another $40 million, taking it up to $805 million. Garrett Crochet is on the move. That was expected. I mean, the White Sox almost moved him last season before the trade deadline, said they held on to him, and he is now going from the White Sox to the Red Sox. Elsewhere in the National League Central, the Brewers have traded away All-Star closer Devin Williams, sending him to the Yankees. Max Fried also signing with the Yankees. That's not a shock, but the term is something. An 8-year deal for Max Fried, over $200 million. And Blake Snell to the Dodgers, Willie Adames to the Giants. A lot of other big names still remain unsigned. Relatively early in the offseason when you think about it, just a couple days beyond the winter meetings. While we have seen some action so far this offseason, in recent years, it's not been uncommon to see a lot of action happening right before spring training. So I'm saying we probably won't see a lot of activity until after the new year. For the Cubs, big question in the short term is the status of Cody Bellinger. A lineup with both he and Kyle Tucker would be pretty sweet. But if Bellinger is on the move, I'd say third base becomes the biggest need to address. Back end of the bullpen, too. I'm guessing the rotation is set, but the Cubs did make a presentation to Japanese star Roki Sasaki. It's expected he's not going to decide who he's signing with until late January. So that could be a late offseason surprise if the Cubs add him as well. And one more note, with the Cubs signing Kyle Tucker, Marquee Sports Network just posted this factoid a short time ago. Cubs now have on their roster 3 of the top 9 picks from the 2015 draft. Dansby Swanson, the top overall pick. Tucker, 3rd. Ian Happ, 9th. So we'll see what moves are made between now and opening day. Still several moves to go. We do know that. We just don't know what they are. I think Nico Hoerner's health also key to that opening day lineup. Even in the offseason, we'll still keep you in the know. All things Chicago Cubs in under 10 minutes. This is the Bricks and Bleachers Podcast.